It's time for us to take a look and review what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Real quick, let's jump to our Lagos team where Adesua is going to lead the charge.
Of course. Thank you very much, Yolanda. Let's start with This Day, the newspaper of record. On top of the masthead there, we have a very important story. Dapman and Dangote clash. Marketers demand retraction of products diversion claim. Now, Dangote claimed that some members of Dapman were diverting products to neighboring countries. Dapman responded saying that smuggling is a national security matter and that he should present, or Dangote Refinery rather, should present verifiable evidence that they are diverting products. Now, very importantly, offshore Lome is recognized as a trading hub and not a blending plant. As some commentators have suggested, Dapman is suggesting that Dangote does like to use common industry practice and act as though it is some big conspiracy. Another example of that, of course, was the laboratory testing before, claims that NUPRC did not have a lab, when we know international best practice is that for most times they do go to third-party lab. But Vimba, what are your thoughts on this story?
I mean, goodness me, it's unfortunate that this continues to drag on. Last week, after the MOU was signed between Dangote and Nupeng, we thought that this would be the end of disputes, if I may call it that, between Dangote and the various other bodies that are organized within the oil and gas sector. Lo and behold, Dapman has now come about to continue challenging the Dangote refinery and their practices, if I may put it that way. Now, if I may clarify, in Dapman's statement, they did go to great lengths to separate themselves from some of those other bodies, from Nupeng, from Petro, and from Ipman, and so forth. Because if you remember, one of the allegations from the Dangote refinery is that Dapman is actually sponsoring some of the strikes that are happening. Anyway, nevertheless, this week we saw Dangote go online with their new scheme to deliver product directly to retailers. They brought in their CNG-powered trucks that, in essence, would cut out several middlemen, because he spoke at great length, Alhaji Aliko Dangote spoke about the frustration of how the value chain has hindered the progress that the refinery would have made by now. He also spoke about the fact that if he wanted to be a monopolist, he would have just bought a few of the retail assets and owned the whole value chain himself. So there's a lot going on, but I think the biggest takeaways are conversations around diversion of product, which is, I think, a diplomatic way to discuss smuggling. We know that smuggling is a big part of the oil and gas sector here in Nigeria. We know that it's happening. And I think it's important that if Dapman do feel that it's not coming from their members, they should take up Dangote's offer to settle all of this in court. And I think that's really the big takeaway from me. Senator Aline Dume has said that we need to be careful about this poisonous media narrative that is trying to blacklist the Dangote refinery. There may be niggling issues between Dangote and various other players in the industry, but it's important that this $20 billion investment, domestic investment by one of our own, is not painted in a bad light, because there's more good than harm that is coming out of the refinery. And I know we don't have much time, but I hope that everybody can sheath their swords.
Well, I hope so too. Now let's go on to the story that we did take earlier, which is that 4 FIRS directors and others have died in the Afriland fire in Lagos Island. 4 staff members of the Federal Inland Revenue Service have been confirmed dead. There are reports that UBA staff have been confirmed dead. Anthony Elumelu took a U-turn as he was heading to New York and has returned Nigeria to mourn his staff members. Now, the deceased FIRS staff members are Mrs. Ekilo Kotse George, who was an assistant director. She was 58 years old. Mr. David Sunday Jato, an assistant director who was 51 years old. Mrs. Inkem Onyemelukwe, a senior manager. She was 54 years old. And Mr. Peter Ifaramaye, a manager who was 48 years old. A real tragedy. Yolanda?
Indeed, Adesua, and thank you so much for, giving a mention, a last respect to those that lost their lives. In one of the reports that I read, it says that one of the persons who actually lost their lives from the names you mentioned was actually transferred elsewhere, and he had just gone to the office for a formal handover and for paperwork when the fire broke out. So it's very unfortunate to hear the way that event turned out. It's also said that the rescue operations were very slow and very poor, and that just goes to show how bad the situation was handled, because the building itself apparently did not have any smoke detectors as well. It's also good to note that those who died from smoke inhalation, which means that they were pretty much choking in all of those fumes that were engulfing the building. Now, if you just think about it in a practical term, you would see that if there's no smoke detectors in a building, it's easy for people to take those fire drill sounds for granted and think that, oh, maybe, there's nothing, it's not serious, there's no smoke alarm to begin with. So the movement would have been slow. And it's really sad as well to hear that the fire service did not act in time. We do not have a reasoning from that. We do not have a feedback from that. But it's very unfortunate that this is becoming something that we say and we hear many times whenever there are issues of fire breakouts. But at the end of the day, humanity still exists, as many people came forward to help. In the report we took earlier, there was a young man who came and, he really literally risked his life by climbing that ladder so high up, trying to help as many people as he could. And many people chipped in as well to try and help salvage the situation. Such a tragedy, such a tragedy.
Yes, definitely. I remember you've done a report on the fire service, even in Abuja over there. Honestly, a tragedy. And as the chairman of Afriland Properties, I'm sure Mr. Tony Elumelu is not just coming to mourn the staff of UBA or FIRS or anyone else who passed in this fire. I'm sure he's also coming because he will have some questions to answer about the state of that building. But let's move on to another story in this day. And we're going to only do this day today because we're stuck for time. But the newspapers all have the same stories. Reverse states, FAC allocations, and these fires. But the next story is that the FAC has disburses 2.25 trillion to the federal government, the states, and the local government. Three tiers of government, they get all that money when the federal account grows 3.635 trillion in August. Now, 1.478 trillion of that came from statutory revenue, 672 billion came from VAT, and 32 billion came from electronic money transfer levy. Now, Gwenga, I want to ask you about this, the different tiers of government getting different funds, but also because The Guardian did a very interesting report 2 days ago about this idea of money illusion, that these tiers of government are seeing these big numbers being called out, and they're not thinking about the real value. They're just looking at the nominal value of the money.
It's very cheering to see the money coming to even the subnationals now, and we can see that even in legislating, it has influenced legislation. A lot of issues that were on the exclusive list are now on the concurrent list, which shows that the state government and subnationals too can embark on projects, and that would promote and accelerate grassroots development at different levels of governance. I think that has been the missing link now. But now that there are a lot of money, but a lot of people are also talking about the real value, the real economic value of these funds, because when we look at the cost of living crisis and the fact that there's been 24% devaluation of the naira, as alarmed by the United Nations, which has really eaten deep in the earning power of an average Nigerian. But when we look at the CBN's policy, which has enabled stability of the foreign exchange and also slowed down credit demands, and also allowed inflow from through oil remittances and also non-oil exports, we can see that this is a clear way to go. But be that as it may, the whole thing is still moving at a very snail speed. the federal government still needs more innovation in management of its economic challenges, and thereby so that we can hit the target faster than what it is right now.
Okay, now let's go to the Punch newspaper. There are two very important stories there. The biggest story we have today is going to be the end of emergency rule in Rivers State. The Punch takes it as the winners and losers as Tinubu reinstates Fubara. In this day newspaper, it said jubilation as Tinubu ends emergency rule in Rivers State. It's the biggest story we have today because I remember when Tinubu announced that state of emergency in Rivers State, a lot of people were left dumbfounded. But now we have reached 6 months afterwards. Vimbai, how do you feel about how it has all played out in Rivers and what you think is going to come next?
Well, goodness me. First of all, the 6-month milestone on its own is one that people were uncertain about. There was so much pressure to bring this emergency rule to an end before the 6-month mark. And then there were also concerns that, there was a potential that it might be extended if certain, extenuating circumstances, if I may call it that, were not fulfilled. However, now we see that 6 months later, to the T, the president says that he does not see any reason to extend it. This day runs with jubilation. I know Daily Trust runs with Fubara returns hobbled. They use the word hobbled, which echoes the words of CUPP yesterday, who said that Fubara will be returning a conquered man. PDP was warning him against decamping to the APC as sort of the final nail in the coffin to this entire project. But in the context of what's happening in Rivers State, I always insist on going back to that December peace accord that had been mediated by the president, because it outlines all of the issues that we've now seen fulfilled and executed during this period of emergency rule. Punch, focusing on the Punch, which speaks about the winners and the losers. Punch documents the winners as President Tinubu, Minister of FCT Nyesom Wike, the Amaule-led faction of the State House Assembly, APC as a party, the local government chairman who sailed through to become chairman on the 30th of August, as well as the sole administrator. From the presidency, the perspective there is that there was an impending economic collapse if anarchy had persisted, and anarchy specifically in the context of oil pipeline vandalism. I think it's important to put that in, because the state itself was generally said to be peaceful, but there were two major incidents: the burning down of the State House Assembly building and the vandalism of the oil pipelines. Well, having said that, time will be the best judge of whether the 6-month emergency rule truly did bring some sort of peace, unity, and reconciliation to the state.
Yes, well, let's stay on the Punch. There's a story there that's very, very dear to my heart and very important, which is that the FG returns history to basic school curriculum. For the first time in decades, Nigerian pupils will now study history continuously from primary 1 to JSS 3, while SS1 to SS3 students will take new civic and heritage studies, integrating history with civic education. The statement from the Ministry of Education says that pupils in primary 1 to 6 will learn about Nigeria's origins, our heroes, our rulers, our culture, politics, economy, religions, colonial rule, and post-independence governance. And I, as a historian, this is honestly something that's very emotional and very dear to me, because we cannot know where we are going if we do not know who we are. So many Nigerians do not have pride in the nation or pride in the identity of being a Nigerian, partly because we do not understand our shared history, our shared culture, and our shared ties. It is so incredibly important. But I think that is all we're going to be able to take actually on the newspaper review today, because we have a very important conversation coming up next.